You know, in my 37 years of hauling cargo across the galaxy, I thought I'd seen everything. Smugglers, pirates, sentient space mushrooms that tried to sell me insurance. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the day I got that transmission. I'm Captain Rex Malone, by the way, owner and operator of the cargo vessel Lucky Strike, which is neither lucky nor particularly striking. But the name came with the ship and I'm too lazy to change it. My crew consists of 3 beings who somehow managed to make my life both easier and infinitely more complicated. First there's Dr. Penny Voss, our xenobiologist. Penny's got more degrees than a thermometer and twice as much paranoia. She won't touch alien food without running it through 17 different scanners first. Last week, she quarantined herself for 3 days because she thought a space dandelion might be plotting against her. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Then we have Tank Morrison, our weapons specialist. Tank's solution to every problem involves something that goes boom. Diplomatic negotiations. Boom. Mechanical failures. Boom. Someone asks him what he wants for lunch. You guessed it. He's got the enthusiasm of a golden retriever and the impulse control of a toddler with a rocket launcher. Finally, there's Myra, our ship's AI. She's programmed to be helpful, but somewhere along the way, she developed what I can only describe as a talent for sarcasm that would make a customer service representative weep with envy. She insists it's a feature, not a bug. So there I was, enjoying a perfectly mediocre cup of synthetic coffee and wondering why the artificial creamer always tastes like disappointment, when the emergency beacon started screaming. Incoming priority transmission from Galactic Research Station Omega 7, Myra announced in that tone she uses when she knows my day is about to get significantly worse. Put it through, I said, already regretting the decision. The hologram that flickered to life was of Commander Zeta Grimlock, a Altarian, whose species looks like someone crossed a praying mantis with a particularly stern librarian. She was practically vibrating with panic, which, for an Altarian, is like seeing a glacier break dance. Captain Malone, she said, her translator struggling to keep up with her rapid-fire speech. We have a Category X biological threat situation on Kepler 442b. The entire research team has gone silent. We need immediate extraction of the specimen before it escapes containment. Category X. I'd heard whispers about Category X classifications in the darker corners of spaceport bars. Organisms so dangerous that just looking at them wrong could end civilizations. Planet killers. Reality breakers. The kind of thing that makes hardened space marines wet themselves and request desk jobs. What exactly are we dealing with here? I asked, though part of me really didn't want to know. Commander Grimlock's compound eyes somehow managed to look even more terrified. We're not entirely sure. The last transmission we received from the research team mentioned something about humanity being, quote, the apex predator of the galaxy, unquote. Then nothing. Radio silence for 72 hours. Tank perked up from his corner where he'd been lovingly polishing his favorite plasma cannon. Apex predator. Sounds like fun. When do we leave? Immediately, Grimlock said. The specimen must be contained before it can spread. The fate of the galaxy may depend on it. And that's how I found myself setting course for Kepler 442b, wondering what kind of monster could make an entire research team disappear and questioning every life choice that led me to this moment. Little did I know, I was about to meet the most dangerous creature in the known universe. His name was Jake, and he was having the time of his life. Kepler 442b turned out to be one of those planets that looks like someone hit the generic alien world button in the universe's design software. Purple sky, orange vegetation, and the kind of breathable atmosphere that makes you suspicious because nothing in space is ever that convenient. The research station sat in a clearing like a metal pimple on the planet's face. Everything looked normal from orbit, which immediately made Penny nervous. She started running bioscans before we even landed. I'm detecting life signs, she announced, practically glued to her scanner display. Multiple species, but they're all clustered in what appears to be the station's recreational area. Recreational area? I asked. Since when do research stations have recreational areas? Since never, Tank said helpfully, checking his weapon charge for the 15th time. Sounds like a trap to me. I vote we blow it up from orbit. You vote we blow everything up from orbit, Mira pointed out. Yesterday you suggested orbital bombardment for a clogged drain. It worked, didn't it? We landed about 50 meters from the station's main entrance. The place was dead quiet, except for what sounded like laughter. And was that music? Penny suited up in full hazmat gear, complete with enough filtration systems to make her look like a paranoid robot. Tanks strapped on every weapon he owned, which was roughly equivalent to a small army's worth of firepower. I just grabbed my sidearm and hoped my life insurance was up to date. The station's airlock cycled us through, without incident, which somehow made everything more ominous. We followed the sound of voices deeper into the facility, past abandoned labs and research equipment that looked like it had been hastily shut down. The recreational area turned out to be the station's former cafeteria, which had been transformed into something that could only be described as the galaxy's most diverse hangout spot. Tables had been pushed together to create a massive seating area, where representatives from at least 8 different species sat in a circle, all focused on something at the center. And there, sitting cross-legged on the floor like he was at the world's weirdest summer camp, was the most dangerous organism in the galaxy. He looked like your average human college student. Faded t-shirt with some band logo I didn't recognize. Jeans with strategically placed holes, and flip-flops that had seen better decades. His hair was doing that thing where it couldn't decide if it wanted to be messy or styled, so it settled for both. "Oh hey," he said, looking up as we entered. His voice had that laid-back California accent that made everything sound like a question. "You guys here for the cultural exchange thing too?" The aliens around him turned to look at us with expressions that ranged from terror to something approaching religious awe. One of them, a Zephyrian whose crystalline features were practically glowing with excitement, gestured toward the human. "Behold," the Zephyrian whispered, "the apex predator in its natural state of casual friendliness. Observe how it shows no fear despite being outnumbered 8 to 1. "Apex predator?" the human asked, looking genuinely confused. "Dude, I'm Jake. I'm a sophomore at UC San Diego. I was just trying to get back to my dorm after spring break, when these guys accidentally beamed me up. Pretty wild mix-up, right?" Penny's scanner was going crazy, beeping like a smoke detector having an existential crisis. "Captain," she whispered, "the biological readings are off the charts. This organism's physiology is unlike anything in our databases." "What exactly makes him so dangerous?" I asked. A Vrethari researcher, whose species looks like a cross between an octopus and a nervous breakdown, tentatively raised one of its many appendages. "We have been studying human culture through this specimen's educational materials. The results are disturbing." Educational materials. I looked around and noticed several tablets displaying what appeared to be Earth entertainment. Jake grinned and gestured to the nearest screen. "Yeah, I've been showing them Netflix. We just finished watching this documentary series about World War II. They were pretty shocked that humans used to fight each other with that level of organization and technology. Then we watched some MMA fights, and I think I broke their minds a little. The Vrethari's chromatophores were shifting through colors I was pretty sure didn't exist in most species' emotional spectrums. The humans," it said in a trembling voice, "they fight each other for entertainment. And the audience cheers." "Well, yeah," Jake said, like he was explaining that water is wet. "It's fun to watch." Oh, and then I showed them this video of Felix Baumgartner's space jump. You know, the guy who jumped from the edge of space? They've been trying to process that for like 3 days now. I was starting to get a very bad feeling about where this was heading. "Jake," I said carefully, "what exactly have you been telling them about humans?" "Just normal stuff, you know? Like how we keep sharks and tigers as pets sometimes. Or how we eat food that's literally designed to cause us pain because we think it tastes good. Oh, and I mentioned how some humans climb mountains just because they're there, even though it might kill them." The silence that followed was the kind of quiet you get right before someone starts screaming. "You told them," I said slowly, "that humans voluntarily seek out danger for fun." "Well, yeah, doesn't everyone?" And that's when I realized we might have accidentally started an interstellar incident. Dr. Penny Voss, who had been quietly hyperventilating into her hazmat suit's oxygen supply, suddenly snapped to attention like someone had just solved the universe's biggest puzzle. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice crackling through the suit's comm system. "Captain, I think I understand what's happening here. Please tell me it involves a simple misunderstanding and not the end of galactic civilization as we know it," I said, though my tone suggested I already knew which way this was going. Penny started pacing, which was impressive considering she was wearing enough protective gear to survive a nuclear winter. Think about it from their perspective. Most species in the galaxy evolved as prey animals or highly specialized predators. They developed intelligence as a survival mechanism, not as a tool for seeking out new and creative ways to almost die. Jake, meanwhile, had pulled out what appeared to be a bag of something bright orange and was casually munching on it. The smell hit us immediately, a combination of cheese and what I can only describe as weaponized spice. "Want some flamin' hot Cheetos?" he offered the nearest alien, a Kentarian whose fur was already standing on end from proximity to the fumes. "They're pretty mild, but they've got a nice kick." The Kentarian backed away like Jake had just offered him a live grenade. "The human consumes chemical warfare agents for pleasure," it announced to the group. "Observe how it shows no signs of distress despite ingesting capsaicin at levels that would hospitalize most species." Capsaicin. Jake looked at the bag thoughtfully. "Yeah, I guess these are pretty spicy. My roommate Dave can eat way hotter stuff though. There's this sauce called Da Bomb that's like 100,000 Scoville units. Dave puts it on pizza." I watched several aliens physically recoil at this information. The Vrathari was now cycling through colors that I was pretty sure indicated either deep philosophical contemplation or a complete nervous breakdown. "Captain," Penny continued, "humans are the only known species that actively seeks out dangerous situations for entertainment. Think about it. Bungee jumping, skydiving, extreme sports, horror movies. We literally pay money to be terrified." "So," I asked, though I was starting to see where this was going. "So every other species in the galaxy sees those behaviors as evidence of either supreme confidence or complete insanity. To them, a creature that voluntarily jumps out of perfectly functional aircraft for fun must be the apex predator of its ecosystem." Jake had moved on from the Cheetos, and was now showing the aliens pictures on his phone. "This is my buddy Tyler base jumping off El Capitan in Yosemite. And here's me doing a backflip off a cliff into a lake last summer. Oh, and this is from when I went cage diving with great white sharks in South Africa." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Every alien eye was now fixed on Jake with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. "You," the Zephyrian said in a voice barely above a whisper, "you deliberately entered the territory of apex marine predators. For recreation." "Well, yeah, it was awesome. You should see the size of their teeth up close." Jake swiped to another photo. This one here was probably 12 feet long. "Beautiful creature." Tank, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. "You know what, I'm starting to see their point. Remember that time you told me about humans who climb mountains without oxygen? Or that guy who crossed Antarctica on foot? That's not normal behavior, Rex. Says the man who once tried to solve a mechanical problem by shooting it with a plasma cannon," Mira interjected. "That worked though." I rubbed my temples where a headache was forming. "So you're telling me that what we consider normal human recreational activities, the rest of the galaxy interprets as evidence that we're unstoppable killing machines?" "Not killing machines," Penny corrected. "Something worse. We're thrill-seeking chaos agents who treat mortal danger like a hobby. From their perspective, humans are the species that looked at the concept of survival and said, you know what would make this more interesting? Let's add unnecessary risk." The truth was starting to sink in, and it was somehow both hilarious and terrifying. Humans weren't feared because we were violent or aggressive. We were feared because we were completely, utterly, and enthusiastically insane by galactic standards. Jake, oblivious to the existential crisis he was causing just by existing, had started making grilled cheese sandwiches, using some kind of portable cooking device he'd apparently improvised from lab equipment. The smell of melting cheese filled the air, and several aliens began backing away further. "The human is now engaging in thermal food preparation," the Kentarian observed with scientific detachment that barely masked pure terror. "Note how it shows no concern for the potential burns from heated surfaces." "It's just a sandwich, guys," Jake said cheerfully, flipping the grilled cheese with the casual confidence of someone who had never considered that cooking might be dangerous. "Anyone want one? I found some pretty decent cheese analog in your food stores." And that's when the alarm started going off. The station's emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in that special shade of red that means your day is about to get exponentially worse. Mira's voice crackled through the comm system with her typical blend of helpfulness and barely contained irritation. "Captain, we've got incoming ships, multiple vessels, various species, and they're all broadcasting the same message on loop. Something about surrendering the biological weapon before they're forced to take drastic action." "Biological weapon," I looked at Jake, who was still holding his grilled cheese sandwich and looking genuinely confused. "They're talking about you, college boy." "Me? But I'm just Jake. I study business administration, and I'm terrible at it." My biggest achievement this semester was not failing intro to accounting. Through the station's windows, we could see the first ships entering the atmosphere. The lead vessel was a Carathian dreadnought, which is basically what happens when someone decides a regular spaceship isn't intimidating enough and needs more spikes. Behind it, I counted at least 12 other ships from various species, all broadcasting increasingly panicked demands for our surrender. Penny was practically vibrating with nervous energy. How did they even know we were here? We haven't reported in yet. The Galactic Research Network has been monitoring all communications about the Category X threat. The Vrathari researcher explained, its chromatophores now displaying what I was pretty sure was the octopus equivalent of a panic attack. When we discovered the true nature of the human specimen, we felt obligated to inform the broader scientific community. What exactly did you tell them? I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. The Zephyrian researcher stepped forward, its crystalline features reflecting the emergency lighting in a way that made it look like a very apologetic disco ball. We may have mentioned that humans are a species that voluntarily enters combat with apex predators for entertainment purposes, and that they consume chemical weapons as recreational snacks, and that they have developed over 47 different ways to throw themselves from extreme heights while attached to various forms of inadequate safety equipment. You forgot the part about how they keep predators as domestic companions, the Kentorian added helpfully, and how they voluntarily subject themselves to horror scenarios for pleasure. Jake took a bite of his sandwich and looked thoughtful. Oh, you guys are talking about pets and scary movies. Yeah, I guess that stuff might seem weird if you're not used to it. My neighbor has this pit bull named Princess, who's the sweetest thing ever, but she looks pretty scary if you don't know her. And I love horror movies. Just watch this great one about a haunted doll that comes to life and murders people. The silence that followed was profound. Even the alarms seemed to quiet down out of respect for the sheer psychological impact of Jake's casual statement. The human, the Vrathari whispered, voluntarily exposes itself to psychological warfare designed to induce terror responses. For entertainment. And it maintains emotional bonds with creatures bred for combat, the Kentorian added. Well, when you put it like that, it does sound pretty metal, Jake admitted. But Princess isn't bred for combat, she's bred for belly rubs and stealing food off your plate when you're not looking. Mira's voice cut through the conversation with typical AI efficiency. Captain, the lead ship is hailing us. Admiral Crixthek of the Carathian fleet wants to speak with you immediately. Fair warning. He sounds like he's about 2 minutes away from ordering orbital bombardment. Put him through, I said, figuring this couldn't possibly get any worse. I was wrong. The hologram that materialized was of Admiral Crixthek, whose species looks like someone crossed a rhinoceros with a particularly angry filing cabinet. His 4 eyes were all focused on me with the kind of intensity usually reserved for targeting systems. Captain Malone, he said, his translator struggling with what sounded like barely controlled rage. You will surrender the biological weapon immediately, or we will be forced to sterilize this entire system. Biological weapon, I gestured toward Jake, who waved cheerfully at the hologram. You mean the college student? Do not mock us, human. We know what your species is capable of. We have seen the reports, creatures that seek out mortal peril for recreational purposes. Beings that consume poison for pleasure, monsters that form emotional attachments to apex predators. Jake had apparently found some kind of hot sauce in the research station's supplies and was now drizzling it on his sandwich. The smell was making my eyes water from across the room. This is sriracha, Jake said conversationally to the nearest alien. It's pretty mild, but it's got this great garlic flavor. My ex-girlfriend Maya used to put this stuff on everything. Ice cream, pizza, cereal. She was hardcore. Admiral Crixthek's expression somehow managed to become even more horrified. It speaks of another of its kind. There are more of these creatures. More? Jake laughed. Dude, there are like 8 billion humans on Earth, and Maya's not even close to the most extreme person I know. There's this guy in my dorm who does parkour off the roof of the administration building, and my cousin Brett once ate a Carolina Reaper pepper on a dare, and then went to his calculus final. The effect of this information on the assembled alien fleet was immediate and dramatic. Several ships began powering up their weapon systems, while others started broadcasting emergency retreat signals. The Carathian dreadnought's main cannon began charging with a low humming sound that made my teeth itch. 8 billion, Admiral Crixthek repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. 8 billion creatures that voluntarily engage in near-death experiences for entertainment. Well, not all of them, Jake said helpfully. My mom's pretty scared of heights, but she does marathon running, which is basically just torturing yourself for 26.2 miles. and my little sister's into competitive cheerleading, which is basically gymnastics but with more ways to fall and hurt yourself. Tank had been unusually quiet during this entire exchange, but now he spoke up with the kind of dawning realization that usually precedes either enlightenment or complete mental breakdown. Rex, he said slowly. I think I'm starting to understand why everyone's so scared. Remember when you told me about that human sport called rugby, where they basically play football without padding and consider head injuries a badge of honor? Or Australian rules football, I added, feeling a strange mix of pride and horror, where the entire point seems to be creating the most chaotic and dangerous version of every sport simultaneously. The humans have weaponized recreation, Admiral Krixtek said, his 4 eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. They have turned survival itself into a form of entertainment. Jake finished his sandwich and wiped his hands on his jeans. You know what, you guys seem really stressed about this whole thing. Maybe what you need is to try some extreme sports yourselves. I bet there's a great cliff jumping spot somewhere on this planet. Nothing clears your head like plummeting toward the ground at terminal velocity. The response to this suggestion was immediate. Half the alien fleet began emergency jump procedures, while the other half started charging their weapons. Admiral Krixtek's hologram flickered as his ship's power systems were apparently redirected to either fleeing or preparing for the fight of their lives. Captain Malone, the Admiral said, his voice now carrying the weight of someone who had just realized he was facing an existential threat to galactic civilization, we are prepared to offer you anything you want. Territory, resources, technology, just keep that thing away from populated systems. That thing, I said, looking at Jake who was now trying to show the Kentorian how to make paper airplanes, is a sophomore business student, who's probably failing most of his classes. Exactly, Admiral Krixtek said grimly. A creature so confident in its abilities that it voluntarily subjects itself to academic torture while simultaneously consuming chemical weapons and forming emotional bonds with predators. The fact that it appears to be failing at its chosen educational path only makes it more terrifying. It suggests that humans consider formal learning to be a recreational challenge, rather than a necessity for survival. And that's when I realized that maybe, just maybe, we had stumbled onto something bigger than a simple first contact scenario. Maybe we had discovered humanity's true place in the galactic community. We weren't the warriors or the diplomats or the traders. We were the universe's designated crazy people, and apparently, that was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever encountered. The situation deteriorated rapidly from there, which I hadn't thought was possible until it actually happened. Within the hour, we had gone from a simple pickup mission to what appeared to be the opening act of an interstellar war, and the cause of it all was currently trying to teach a Verthare researcher how to fold origami cranes. See, you fold it like this. Jake was saying, completely oblivious to the fact that 17 different alien fleets had now surrounded the planet. My little sister taught me this. She's really into crafts. Last month she made this whole diorama of the Battle of Gettysburg using just popsicle sticks and fake blood. The Verthare's chromatophores were cycling through what I was pretty sure was the biological equivalent of a blue screen of death. The juvenile humans, it whispered. They recreate ancient conflicts as entertainment. Oh yeah. Emma's really into history, especially the violent parts. She did this whole presentation on medieval torture devices for her middle school history class. Got an A+. I was starting to understand why the aliens were so terrified. Every single thing Jake said sounded like evidence that humans were bred for warfare and psychological intimidation. The fact that he was saying it all with the casual enthusiasm of someone discussing the weather only made it worse. Mara's voice crackled through the comm system with an update that somehow managed to sound both helpful and apocalyptic. Captain, we've got a new arrival. Admiral Glorb of the Hegemony Grand Fleet is requesting immediate communication. Also, his ship is approximately the size of a small moon and appears to be equipped with enough firepower to sterilize the entire system. Of course it is, I muttered. Put him through. The hologram that materialized was easily the most impressive alien I'd ever seen, and I've seen some doozies. Admiral Glorb belonged to a species called the Hegemony, which looks like what would happen if you crossed a jellyfish with a crystal chandelier and then gave it a really bad attitude. His translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that I was pretty sure were the equivalent of profanity in his native language. Captain Malone, he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had probably conquered entire star systems before breakfast. I am Admiral Glorb, Supreme Commander of the Hegemony Defense Force. I have come to personally oversee the containment of this threat to galactic civilization. Threat. I gestured toward Jake, who had successfully taught the Verthare how to make a paper crane and was now attempting to explain the concept of paper football. He's making arts and crafts. Precisely, Admiral Glorb said, his bioluminescent patterns shifting to what I assumed was the color of deep concern. We have analyzed the data provided by the research team. This creature represents the most dangerous form of psychological warfare ever encountered. It projects an aura of harmless friendliness while simultaneously demonstrating capabilities that suggest it could single-handedly destabilize entire civilizations. Jake looked up from his paper football demonstration. Oh hey there, cool light show, dude. Are you bioluminescent? That's awesome. I knew this marine biology major who was really into jellyfish. She used to dive with them all the time, even the dangerous ones. Said the stings were totally worth it for the photos. The effect of this statement on Admiral Glorb was immediate and dramatic. His bioluminescent patterns shifted to what I could only describe as the color of existential dread. It speaks casually of voluntary exposure to venomous creatures, he announced to his fleet. This confirms our worst fears. The humans have evolved beyond the need for basic survival instincts. Survival instincts? Jake laughed. Nah, we've got those. We just like to test them sometimes. You know, see how far we can push things before they break. Like my roommate Dave. He once ate nothing but energy drinks and pizza rolls for 2 weeks straight just to see what would happen. What happened? The Kentorian asked, apparently unable to resist the horrifying fascination of human self-destructive behavior. He passed out during his organic chemistry final and had to retake the class. But he said it was totally worth it for the experience. Dave's hardcore like that. Admiral Glorb's patterns were now cycling through colors that probably didn't exist on most worlds. The humans, he said slowly, voluntarily damage their own biological systems to gather experiential data. They treat their own bodies as experimental subjects. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds pretty scientific, Jake said cheerfully. But mostly we just do stuff because it's fun. Like, have you ever been to a music festival? Thousands of people standing in a field for days, sleeping in tents, eating questionable food, and listening to music so loud it damages your hearing. It's amazing. Thousands, Admiral Glorb repeated faintly. They gather in groups of thousands to voluntarily subject themselves to sensory damage and primitive living conditions. Burning Man's even crazier, Jake continued, apparently warming to the topic. People spend weeks in the desert with limited water and extreme temperatures, just to build art installations and then burn them down. My cousin went last year and said it was the best week of his life, even though he got dehydrated and had to be treated for heat exhaustion. Tank, who had been listening to this exchange with growing understanding, suddenly spoke up. Jake, have you ever been in a fight? A fight? Not really. I mean, I did karate for a while when I was a kid, but that was more about discipline and self-control. Although I did try boxing once. Got my nose broken in the first round, but it was actually pretty fun. There's something pure about it, you know. Just you and another person, testing your limits. The silence that followed this statement was so complete that I could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. Every alien in the room was staring at Jake with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for natural disasters or cosmic phenomena. It engages in ritualized combat, Admiral Glorb said in a voice barely above a whisper, and describes traumatic injury as fun. The human, the Zephyrian added, actively seeks out physical confrontation with others of its species for recreational purposes, and considers nasal fractures to be a positive experience, the Verthari concluded. Jake shrugged. I mean, it hurt, but it taught me something about myself. Plus, I got this cool scar. He pointed to a barely visible mark on his nose. Chicks dig scars, right? Chicks? Admiral Glorb asked, his patterns now cycling through what I was pretty sure were colors that violated several laws of physics. You know, girls, women. The human mating ritual involves demonstrating that you can survive physical trauma and find it enjoyable. It's actually pretty straightforward when you think about it. And that's when Admiral Glorb made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Captain Malone, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, I am prepared to offer the human species a deal. We will provide you with an entire sector of space, complete with habitable worlds, advanced technology, and unlimited resources. In exchange, you will agree to keep your people contained within that sector and never, under any circumstances, attempt to spread your recreational philosophy to other species. That's actually not a bad offer, I said, though I was pretty sure there was a catch somewhere. There is one condition. Admiral Glorb continued. This specimen must be studied. We need to understand how a species can evolve such a complete disregard for personal safety while maintaining the intelligence necessary for space travel. The scientific implications are staggering. Jake looked around the room at all the aliens staring at him with mixture of terror and fascination. So let me get this straight. You guys want to give humanity a bunch of planets and technology because you think we're crazy. Not crazy. Admiral Glorb corrected. Evolutionarily impossible. Your species represents a fundamental contradiction to everything we understand about how intelligence develops. You are simultaneously the most advanced and most self-destructive species we have ever encountered. Huh. Jake said thoughtfully. That's actually kind of cool. So what would this studying involve? Because I've got classes to get back to, and I'm already behind on my economics homework. The human treats formal education as a secondary priority. Admiral Glorb noted to his fleet. Even when offered unlimited resources and territory, it remains concerned about academic obligations that it has already admitted to failing. I'm not failing, Jake protested. I'm just struggling with some of the concepts. Macroeconomics is really hard. It voluntarily subjects itself to complex cognitive challenges despite acknowledging its inadequacy in those areas. The Zephyrian observed. The human approaches intellectual difficulty the same way it approaches physical danger, as a recreational opportunity. You guys are really reading a lot into this, Jake said, but he was smiling. I just want to graduate and maybe get a job somewhere. Nothing too exciting, maybe something in marketing or customer service. The reaction to this statement was immediate and dramatic. Half the alien fleet began emergency jump procedures, while the other half started broadcasting surrender signals. Customer service, Admiral Glorb said faintly. It seeks employment in direct conflict resolution with hostile entities, as recreation. And that's when I realized that maybe Jake was right. Maybe we were reading too much into this. But then again, maybe that was exactly the point. After all, only humans would find the idea of dealing with angry customers to be a reasonable career choice. The standoff continued for another 3 hours, during which Jake managed to inadvertently terrify the assembled alien fleets by casually mentioning human activities that apparently violated every known principle of evolutionary psychology. The final straw came when he started talking about something called Black Friday shopping. So basically, Jake was explaining to a group of increasingly horrified xenobiologists, millions of humans wake up at like 4 in the morning to stand in lines outside stores, and then when the doors open, they all rush in at the same time to fight over discounted electronics. People get trampled sometimes, but the savings are totally worth it. The humans, Admiral Glorb said in a voice that suggested his worldview was undergoing rapid reconstruction, they engage in mass combat scenarios over material goods that they could acquire without violence at a slightly higher cost. Well, when you put it like that, it does sound kind of weird, Jake admitted. But you should see my mom on Black Friday. She's got strategies, backup plans, spreadsheets. It's like watching a military operation, but for getting a good deal on a flat-screen TV. That's when I had what I can only describe as a moment of entrepreneurial genius. It hit me like a plasma bolt to the brain, and suddenly I could see the solution to everyone's problems spreading out in front of me like a beautifully choreographed business plan. Admiral Glorb, I said, stepping forward with the kind of confidence that comes from either brilliant insight or complete desperation, I think you're approaching this all wrong. Explain, he said, his bioluminescent patterns shifting to what I hoped was curiosity rather than impending violence. You're treating Jake like a weapon of mass destruction, but what if he's actually the solution to a problem you didn't know you had? Which problem would that be? Admiral Glorb asked, though several other fleet commanders were now leaning in with interest. Boredom, I said simply. Think about it. Your species have achieved interstellar travel, conquered disease, eliminated poverty, established galactic peace. What's left? What do you do when you've solved all the major problems and life becomes perfectly safe and predictable? The silence that followed was different from the terrified quiet we'd been experiencing. This was thoughtful silence, the kind that happens when someone presents an idea that's either brilliant or completely insane. The humans, I continued, have figured out how to manufacture excitement in a post-scarcity society. They've turned danger into entertainment, risk into recreation, and struggle into sport. They've solved the fundamental problem of advanced civilization, what to do when survival is no longer a challenge. Jake looked up from where he'd been teaching the Kenturian how to play rock, paper, scissors. Are you talking about extreme sports? Because I know this guy who does wingsuit flying. He jumps off mountains wearing basically a flying squirrel suit. Super dangerous, but the footage is incredible. Yes, I said, gesturing toward Jake like he was a particularly impressive PowerPoint presentation. Exactly that. What if instead of fearing human recreational philosophy, you learned from it? What if Jake here could teach your species how to add calculated excitement back into your lives? Admiral Glorb's patterns shifted through several colors before settling on something that looked suspiciously like intrigue. You're suggesting that this human could serve as an instructor in voluntary risk-taking behavior. I'm suggesting, I said, warming to the theme, that Jake could be the galaxy's first extreme experience consultant. Think about it. Controlled danger, managed risk, supervised thrills, all the excitement of human-style recreation with proper safety protocols and medical supervision. You want me to teach aliens how to do extreme sports? Jake asked, looking genuinely excited for the first time since this whole mess started. That sounds awesome. I bet I could set up a sick base jumping course on one of those cliff planets in the Kepler system. The reaction from the assembled aliens was immediate and visceral. Half of them looked terrified, while the other half looked intrigued. It was hard to tell with some of the species involved, but I was pretty sure I was seeing curiosity. The human proposes to establish facilities for voluntary near-death experiences, the Zephyrian said slowly, but with safety measures to prevent actual death. Think of it as I searched for the right words, extreme tourism. You could experience the thrill of mortal peril without the actual mortality. It's like virtual reality, but with real adrenaline. Admiral Glorb was quiet for a long moment, his patterns cycling through what looked like complex calculations. Finally, he spoke. This proposal has merit, he said. Our species have indeed achieved a level of safety and predictability that has perhaps limited our experiential range. The concept of voluntary controlled risk-taking as a form of entertainment is fascinating from an anthropological perspective. Plus, Jake added helpfully, I could start with some really basic stuff. Maybe some beginner rock climbing or introductory skydiving. You don't have to jump straight to the hardcore stuff like free solo climbing or volcano boarding. Volcano boarding? The Vrathari asked faintly. Oh yeah, it's this thing where you ride a board down the side of an active volcano. Super fun but probably not great for beginners. You'd want to work up to that. Admiral Glorb made what I assumed was a decision-making sound. Very well, Captain Malone, we accept your proposal. The human specimen will be relocated to a controlled environment where it can establish training facilities for voluntary risk-taking activities. Participation will be entirely optional, and all activities will be conducted under strict medical supervision. There's just one thing, I said, sensing victory but wanting to nail down the details. Jake's not a specimen. He's a business partner. This whole operation is going to be a joint venture between humanity and the galactic community. Humans provide the expertise in controlled chaos. Aliens provide the technology and resources. Everyone wins. And Jake added, I'm definitely going to need some help with the business side of things. Maybe you guys have some kind of galactic MBA program, because I'm really struggling with the economic stuff. Admiral Glorb's patterns shifted to what I was now certain was amusement. I believe we can arrange something. And that's how Jake Martinez, sophomore business student from UC San Diego, became the galaxy's first director of extreme experience management. Within 6 months, he had established training facilities on 12 different worlds, each one specializing in different levels of controlled danger. The Zephyrians, it turned out, had a natural talent for rock climbing once they got over their initial terror. The Vrathari developed an unexpected enthusiasm for whitewater rafting, though they insisted on wearing enough safety equipment to survive a spacecraft crash. The Kentaurians discovered a love for hang gliding that bordered on obsession. Even Admiral Glorb eventually tried bungee jumping, though he insisted on having a full medical team standing by and enough backup safety systems to launch a space mission. He described the experience as transformative and immediately booked a follow-up session. Jake's operation, which he eventually branded as human-level thrills, experience life like you actually live it, became the most popular entertainment enterprise in the galaxy. He never did finish his economics degree, but as he pointed out, he was now running a multi-system business empire, so he figured he'd learned everything he needed to know about supply and demand. As for me, I became humanity's unofficial ambassador to the galactic extreme sports community, which is probably the weirdest job title in the universe but pays surprisingly well. Turns out there's good money in being the liaison between a species of adrenaline junkies and a galaxy full of safety-obsessed civilizations who desperately want to learn how to have fun without actually dying. The best part, Jake still makes grilled cheese sandwiches for anyone who visits his facilities. He says it helps put the aliens at ease before they do something terrifying like go ziplining or try indoor skydiving. And that's the story of how humanity accidentally became the galaxy's recreational drug dealers, except instead of chemicals, we were peddling pure, uncut excitement to civilizations that had forgotten what it felt like to have their hearts race for any reason other than medical emergencies. Not bad for a college sophomore who just wanted to get back to his dorm room.